In this tutorial, we want to add some features for the rotation of the camera. First, we want to rotate around the player so that we can view the model from all sides. And only when we start moving will the player actually face away from the camera. And second, we also want to hide the mouse cursor when we are rotating. We start by creating a look at controller, which is kind of a dumb name, but I couldn't think of anything better to describe what it does. Our first test will make sure that the target game object will look at another target game object. To be in line with other components, we will apply the behavior to a game object labeled target, and a game object labeled look at will be used to derive the forward vector of the rotation. Let's move our look up game object 1 unit upwards. After applying the behavior, we expect our target to be rotated towards the look at game object. And we wrap our game objects in a game object wrapper so we can also assign a handle if we want to. We add the missing fields and expect that the test fails. Similar to our first tutorial, we will use rotation look at to implement this behavior. In our next test, we want to make sure that we can invert the forward vector. We add the missing field and the test fails. By simply inverting the look at transform position, we can satisfy this test. In our next test, we want to make sure that this also works when our target is not at the vector 0 position. So we put our target above the look at, which means that by inverting the forward vector, we expect a vector up. And of course, this fails. In our implementation, we now derive the actual view direction and add or subtract it from the target position depending on the invert value. We also want to be able to restrict this rotation to a certain plane. We define a 45 degrees rotated plane via its normal and position the look at game object at a forward vector. And then assert a rotation towards vector 0, 1, 1, which is the forward vector in our defined plane. We add the missing field and run the test, which will fail. We check against the restriction plane normal, and when it is not 0, we will use Unity's vector free project on plane function to restrict it to the plane. Let's replace our player model with a capsule and remove the old rotation behavior for the player. which now means that our movement directions do not rotate with the camera. We fix this by adding a look at behavior to the movement direction. Before applying any translation for the movement, we will simply first look away from the camera. Here the player handle will be our target and the camera handle will be our look at. And we restrict the rotation to a horizontal plane. And now we simply plug it into the movement behavior. If we remove our plane restriction, we will simply rotate away from the camera at any angle. We have only updated our forward movement so far. In the prefab, we implement this behavior for the other movement directions by copying the forward movement. And now it works for all movement directions. For illustration purposes, I added a quote-unquote face to our player, so that we can see it only rotates when we move. I refactored our implementation a bit to be more expressive. Next, we add a cursor handle as a scriptable object. We will use it to expose static cursor functions to the editor. For now, we just want to expose the visibility. So we write a test in which we hide the cursor via a cursor handle. We add the missing method, run the test, and it fails. In the implementation, we simply wrap the setter of cursor visible. We then create a menu item for our cursor handle. We create a folder static and add a cursor handle in it. We add input for rotate begin and rotate end. We also create corresponding event handles and connect the inputs with their event handles. We add a new game object for the cursor behavior. It will have one child to hide the cursor and one child to unhide the cursor. Hide will listen to rotate begin, call cursor set visibility false. Unhide will listen to rotate end and call cursor set visibility true. My input setup was incomplete, so it doesn't work yet, because I forgot to actually raise the event. But now it works and the cursor is hidden during the rotation. Now we simply need to update our prefabs. But this is it for this tutorial. Next time we will use rigid body and colliders to implement jumping. Let me know what you think and thanks for watching.